A controversy has exploded regarding the use of Romans 13 in a press conference yesterday before the press, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and also the Trump spokeswoman before another group of aggressive and surly reporters unhappy with her responses, raised the question about the children of immigrant families here, as they say, illegally being separated and being imprisoned put in boxes by federal military and police officials, and often just lost. There's a story of about 1,200 children, very small children, having sort of disappeared in the system. And the question, or the assertion made by the Attorney General, is that Romans 13, the famous passage in the Word, allows the state to operate and requires obedience in all respects and in every matter. That Romans 13 requires an absolute submission to whatever the law is, and presumably, whatever an official or an officer or an agent or a legislator or an attorney says the law is. But the problem with the discussion about Romans 13 is that it is a very common misquote, a very common Armenian perspective. In other words, it comes from the humanistic side of Christianity, from Jacobus Arminius, which is his Latin name, a Dutch theologian who resisted and rejected the conception of the magistrate as proposed by the Reformation, specifically John Calvin, who said that the magistrate is God's servant, and there is a limit on his authority, and that authority is to serve God's law and to reflect God's law in society, to oppress and hound the evil and the wicked, and to encourage and to protect the good. And so what I want to look at today, since we have given a great deal of attention to the question of the right use of the law, is this. What about obedience to so-called law when that law is misrepresented? What is the law? Say in Red Bank, is Alan DeBerry, the UTC biology student who photographed cops in the middle of a riot that they had caused at the gallery on May 6th, is Alan DeBerry a sinner for making that video and violating some unspoken policy among officers in Red Bank, Tennessee, who think somehow that their activity is private and cannot be photographed and cannot be witnessed, and that if you do that, we're going to steal your camera from you. We're going to seize your camera, put it in your phone camera, and put it in the evidence room as evidence of the crimes that you are recording. Presumably the crimes of, you think we're committing crimes. Well, we're going to keep that phone because the people we're arresting, they've committed crimes, and we need that evidence on your smartphone, your iPhone, against them. Well, let me just suggest that Alan DeBerry, in insisting on making a record, which is his constitutional right to do, is not the sinner in that case. There was sin on that dark Sunday morning in that parking lot, but I would like to suggest it was not on the part of the revelers and the people who were gassed and thrown to the ground and now criminally charged before city magistrate Johnny Houston. They may be criminals in the allegation side now, but they're not, I would suggest that they're not sinners. Well, how is that? Where in Romans 13 do we have this idea that there's a qualification, that it is not, as Jeff Sessions suggests, absolute? And because we're told by American Christianity, whose adherents are many, that there is a neutrality. American Christians, maybe you, my listener included, believe that there are whole areas of life that are morally and ethically and even religiously neutral. Public schools are morally and ethically neutral. Federal jurisdiction, anything that Congress does, effectively is outside of God's government and God's law. It's in an area that is neutral. Most evangelicals think that you could drop into a foreign country, just parachute in a foreign country in another part of the world that you've never been in, maybe like Gulliver in Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travel. And you could look all around you at the institutions, the courts, the hospitals, universities, and not know which God those people served. You could look at those institutions and think somehow that you wouldn't know. In other words, they believe that civil institutions are somehow morally neutral, that they don't make an argument for God or against God. They would look at cops, they would look at courts, they would look at prisons, they would look at militaries and say, well, I really can't tell which God they serve, whether it's the God of the Bible or Moloch. There's no way to tell. The only way you can tell which God controls is take a census of every person and have them reveal what's in their heart, right? Only in the heart of the individual does God live. They effectively are arguing. Only there can we see, looking at the numbers, whether God is sort of in charge of that country or not in charge. The public institutions, well, they're in an area outside of our purview, outside of our means of judgment. We can't measure them. We can't really evaluate them. We don't know. And that is the default position of Christianity here in the United States. And you're not a Christian, my listener. Oh, well, that's fine. But what I hope to do in the next minute or two is suggest that the people you know who are Christians have a real problem, because they disbelieve, they reject and disbelieve their own words. And what they do is they follow Jeff Sessions. And their ministers, they're ministers who are, the ministers in America, they are more representative of the synagogue than the temple, right? Their doctrine is from the synagogue, not the temple. And here's what Jeff Sessions says, I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government, because God has ordained them for the purpose of order. Orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves and protect the weak and the lawful. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders echoed that. She says, I can say that it is very biblical to enforce the law. That is actually repeated a number of times throughout the Bible. It is a moral policy to follow and enforce the law. Well, this at best is very muddled thinking, and that it doesn't represent what Romans 13 is about at all. Romans 13 establishes the magistrate. Okay, the magistrate. If you read Abraham Kuyper sometime, he has his not much of his work is translated from Dutch, but there is one that is, and there's the Princeton Lectures in, I think, 1904. It's a terrific volume, a great apologist for Christianity. And I think it's very general discussion, but I think you'd appreciate his discussion. And I think he frames it this way. The magistrate, the government, is over society, right? You have society, decentralized society all across the land, all across Chattanooga, Hamilton County. The people live, right? They have their businesses, their families, their churches, their doings, their pleasures, their swimming pools, and their riverbend festivals. And above them is the magistrate, the state. And the job of the state is there hovering over society, making a dark shadow upon it because of the fall, right? Adam's fall. And we have the sin problem, and some sins are public and they're called crimes. And the state is there to oppress those who commit crimes, right? The state, because it wields the sword, can't change people internally. It can't change their hearts to make them love good. It can only stop and oppress and harass and fine and bring restitutional requirements upon the criminal. That's all it has the authority to do. It does not. The state is not a restorative agency. It is not an agency of grace. It is an agency of the sword. So it is destructive by definition. It is only destructive. It cannot do. It cannot affect positive good. It works on negative commands only. It is only negative. Now, if you read in the second, and you can see that in the Romans 13 discussions. We'll have just to let you know what the show looks like today. I'm glad you're giving me just 5 minutes. Well, never mind. I won't say who's coming on. Okay, you'll just get what you get and move on with your day, and that's quite all right. Romans 13 says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and all the authorities that exist are from God." So there are authorities. Your parents are the first ones, and there are, and then in the realm of the state, there is the judge. The judge, scripturally, the state, how do we call them states? The state scripturally has authority in a judicial capacity only. It is a passive authority. It is not activist. It is not a legislative authority. It is not an executive authority. So the ideal free market Christian libertarian sort of anarcho-capitalist society would restrain itself to having essentially just one branch that would be judicial, and it's passive. It doesn't do anything. It has no authority to do anything at all unless there is a crime, a war, or a dispute in which case the judge settles the dispute to bring peace to the realm, right? That's the origins of chancery in the 13th century in England were about that very thing, bringing peace to the realm, the chancellor being a high bishop serving the king. Therefore, whoever resists the authority is to resist the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. Here is being established the general concept of that hovering thing over society, the harsh, angry, sword-bearing force, right? A mechanical system on top of an organic life. It is mechanical, it is hard, it is small, but it's angry, and it's angry against the wicked. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Okay, here now is the definition that Jeff Sessions is not paying attention to. Rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. So the authority, the magistrate, has a job of harassing, terrorizing the evil. He's not a terror to good. So if you're opening a soup kitchen without a permit, well, who cares? You know, if you're providing a legal service and you're not an attorney, well, that's okay too. Using nolo press, right? There are many things. You're opening a soup kitchen. Again, like I said, there are all kinds of things that are outside the scope of authority of the true magistrate. But the problem is we have ungodly magistrates and ungodly laws, and we have unlawful laws in our country, a whole panoply of laws that are wicked. We have opinions of courts pretended to be laws through the concept of of judicial supremacy, of course, upheld by homosexuals, right? Upheld by the lawyer guild. They all uphold that doctrine. What the judge says an opinion in one case is effectively a law, and we have the rule of men. It is a judgment, and the question is, to what extent are these lawless laws and pseudo laws and misinterpretations of actual existing human laws binding upon us? Are we bound by everything that someone says a law says? Are we bound by an opinion of a court that says what a law says? Is that opinion now a law? Well, in fact, it is in many cases. Look at the Tennessee roadblock statute. Roadblocks are unconstitutional, but the high court allows them. And and so we have governing roadblocks in Red Bank. I'm going to be asking Red Bank about their roadblock policy. We have State versus Hicks and State versus Downey, which are not laws at all, but they're just opinions. And there's a policy drawn from those cases, are drawn orders called general orders from police departments that reflect ostensibly those opinions. So we have policy of law enforcement based on opinions that are unconstitutional. I mean, the acceptance of an unconstitutional act. Verse 4 says, "For he is God's minister to you for good." Notice the role of the magistrate, the role of, we could say, the sheriff. In Chattanooga and Hamilton County, the closest thing to a magistrate we have is the sheriff, and that seat is occupied by Jim Hammond. He is the protector of the court, the enforcer of the court's orders, and the authority to hold people for trial. That is his job, starting with the court. The origins of his office are in fact biblical. They are connected with the land, and they have a biblical common law, earthbound, sort of organic existence. He is God's minister to you for good, but if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister and avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. Now, as I'm just stop that just for a second, just to let you know that in contrast to the law that God gives for the magistrate in Romans 13, there is the contradiction of it, and that is in Revelation 13. And I just want to pause that. I don't think we can delve into it right now, but in Revelation 13, you have a more accurate summation of what is represented, I would like to suggest, by the federal authority today. It is a kind of a beast rising out of the sea in Revelation 13:1, and with 7 heads and 10 horns. That is maritime imperial jurisdiction. It is in admiralty jurisdiction, and it is in many ways blasphemous against God. Look at federal laws. Look at federal activity. Go to Facebook today, where we are live, and I popped a meme this morning down there about the number of governments we've overturned 40 governments since World War II. We've intervened in 40 countries as the imperial eagle power. We're a power of eagles, just as the Romans were. The same eagle that adorned the the Nuremberg celebrations of the National Socialist Party there with the thousands and thousands of cheering young blonde people. And on the poles of those banners carried down those grand colonnades were flags, German flags, and the eagle perched on top. That's our eagle, the same one. And you could call that the Moloch state. Okay, that's the Moloch state where the state is God and the state demands worship. And in Revelation 13, you can see that. That is what we have today. And that is what Jeff Sessions, I'd like to say effectively, that is what he effectively represents. And that is the passage, of course, now that has the revelation, the mark of the beast discussion at the end, the last few verses of that chapter. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. That, of course, is the administrative society that we have. That is the modern state. God's word has brought civilization in major expanses, but there was a great retreat arising from the Reformation. Right, the modern state rose from the Reformation, which is the way God uses evil. Right, he can draw a straight line with crooked sticks. And the modern state, which is the terror state, the modern welfare, warfare, surveillance, terror state, that has come as a kind of reaction, a sinful innovation, you might say, from the blessings of the Reformation. The Reformation is still in process. But now, getting back to Romans 13, the passage cited as demanding obeisance, right? Demanding obedience. Who are you to criticize our policy for arresting non-criminal people who are trying to get across a bit of water into what we call the United States, right? That river there, that's the demarcation point. All that border really says is that at this point, federal authority, the state authority ends, right? That's all it means. It doesn't mean that somehow you cross that line and you're a criminal. These people are not criminals before God. They're not sinners to come here, right? If they've committed no sin in crossing a river, paying a mule, the man who brought them, $1,000 or $4,000. If they're not sinners, how can they be criminals? Okay, that's the question. If they're not sinners, how can they be criminals? Well, they can only be criminals if you believe in Jeff Sessions' view of Romans 13. Now, it goes on to say that there are limits. Notice verse 7. It's about taxes. Verse 5, it says, you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience's sake. Now, we're subject to federal authority right now because that's what God has ordained. God ordained evil things to happen, right? God ordained Pol Pot. He ordains National Socialism in Germany. He ordains the Soviet Union. Now, that's not to say that because God ordains things to happen that are evil, that evil is normative. And that's the mistake I think that evangelical people, Christian people whom you my listener know, that's the mistake they're making. They say that, well, it may be wrong somehow, but that's what it is. We just have to obey. We just have to sort of accept. It's neutral. Well, it's not neutral. It's evil. And you, my listener, you need to be angry at the evil things done by those people in Washington. You need to be angry. And you need to say, what can we do here to make it better? What can we do here to stop their interventions? What can we do here to say, your laws don't matter? Your opinions don't matter. You can redefine marriage all you want. We know what marriage is. It's in our Constitution. And we expected Bill Knowles to defend the Constitution and defend marriage as one man and one woman. Get out of our face. Get lost. Go away. California is voting. It's going to be on the ballot to divide into threes. And that is the megatrend, by the way. Very encouraging megatrend. Decentralization, the end of the era of centralization. The modern state on its way out. It's a long-term process. It'll last a couple 300 years. Don't forget, the makings of the modern state began in the late 1600s. And among the clergy, there were defenders of I think Thomas Hobbes in the Leviathan, for example, creating the Committee of Wise Men. Well, just to get to this last point here about taxes, render therefore to all their due. Notice now what it says, what their due is. Taxes to whom taxes are due. Customs to whom customs. Fear to whom fear. Honor to whom honor. But that doesn't say pay taxes to those to whom it's not due, right? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say pay customs to those to whom customs are not due. No, just to those who are due. So there again, we have a question. What is the actual law? And I'd like to suggest that in many instances, in this country, in this city, Chattanooga, we have laws that pretend to be laws that aren't at all. And I'm thinking, you got it. I'm thinking exactly right. Of our transportation project, administrative notice on transportation. Tennessee Code Title 55 has nothing to do with free use of the road, only commerce. So there again, you have an example of a law falsely presented and falsely and wrongly enforced. We need to resist.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
2 high-profile Dixon County inmates